Everybody, welcome back to the Cashflow Chronicles on the Matt Moolah channel. We're always here with Hot Chris, the Desi God. Chris, we had a good chat yesterday. We have 3 topics today, but of course, I'm sure we're going to come up with something else. Celsius, which is something that I saw. They reported earnings, blew them out, and I'm just kind of curious if it's still cheap enough to potentially take a dabble or even a thought about dabbling. So I just wanted to cover that. Cruise lines, I haven't looked at it in a year, and you took a little quick look at it, and I'm curious what you're seeing for it and what we can kind of gander now that they're kind of getting back to a place 3 years after the pandemic of getting up and back up to speed. Maybe not necessarily pandemic levels or pre-pandemic levels, but just like what we saw with Disney, things are kind of coming up to the upswing with some of these things, and curious how Carnival Cruise Line is doing. And then, of course, we have our public account, of which I can take a quick screenshot of, and we could talk about that in a little bit. We have quite a few positions that we've added since last week, and it's only like about a week or so until we add another tranche of capital to it. So pretty cool to be able to get it to a spot and have a couple positions. Some are positive, some are negative. Actually, one's very negative. We could talk about that one. And I didn't get it at the right time, unfortunately. Had we got it at the right time, we'd probably be even. But that's just unfortunately how the way of the world works. And then, that's pretty much it. And then we'll probably, I'm sure, talk about something else in the background. But do you want to kick it off with Celsius, or would you rather go with Carnival first?
Let's do Celsius first.
Got it.
I think that one is just on a tear, and it's worth taking a look at.
Let me just take a screenshot of the public account. And while you're talking about Carnival, we could always, I could always knock out some of the numbers here. Yeah. Celsius.
All right. So Celsius is, if anyone really wants to know, is a energy drink maker. They primarily make energy drinks that are just going gangbusters right now. It means, they've got the effect of, how do I say it? So the mass appeal to Celsius is that they're energy drinks that everyone likes. The taste is pretty good from, depends on which consumer you ask, but the calorie count is near 0. So majority of like the flavoring that they use is, it's a little bit synthetic. So that is a detraction, so some people that may be more on the natural side of things may not like it that much, but overall, the product has just been flying off the shelves everywhere. They've really, hit a stride in their growth. And so right now, when you look at their year-over-year numbers, it's just triple-digit growth every quarter. And so the valuation has exploded to the upside in the last year. And so if you look at Celsius was like less than like 3 years ago, it was like $5 stock. Now it's trading at like 100
it's absurd,
70 something. So it just goes to show that sometimes when you have a product that that catches fire, the valuation doesn't necessarily matter. It's just a matter of, hey, we need to get in. We need to get in. This is the remnant. This feels like Monster Energy to some degree, where Monster Energy is probably one of the best performing stocks of, I think, the last 20 years. So can you put up Monster up there real quick?
Yeah.
So it's very reminiscent of Monster. So
Monster, I remember, had I invested in Monster back in the day when I was drinking it, in 2008, 2009, I probably wouldn't be talking to you guys. I'd probably be on an island.
Yeah. If you look at Monster is up almost 120,000%. I'm not. That's not like me exaggerating. That is literally how much it's up.
If you put in $1, you'd have $1,200 now.
Yeah, that is crazy amount of return. So if you put in 100, you multiply that out. It's a substantial amount of gain.
You'd have $120,000.
Yeah,
for $100. Let's go.
So Celsius is a very similar story. If you look at what they were worth, at one point, like in 2020, so not too long ago, these guys were like pennies on the dollar. If you think about it, like $3, and now they're trading close to almost 170. So it just goes to show that sometimes you could be a public company that just has a product, and once it catches fire, it's amazing. You know.
And one of the things that I saw, I mean, kind of going back to what Hot Chris is talking about, is like initially I was just like, oh, there's no way it can keep going up, right? That's sometimes what you see.
I think Matt just closed himself today. Was that you or was that me?
I don't know. That just like toggled both of us off. That was really weird. But yeah, like sometimes I might have accidentally clicked something by accident there. Sometimes when you pull into a stock and you see something like this up 4,000% already, you're like, okay, it's done, right? Like, why would anybody get back after it? It doesn't make any sense. It's already made its gains. But when you think about it, I mean, let's just look at the market cap really quick. It's still only a $13 billion company, right? And Monster, for example, is, you know, keep in mind it can get dangerous when you do something like this, but Monster is a $57 billion company. But the thing is I want to look at, you know, is this an opportunity where people can still potentially go in and make money? Because I don't know if that might be a minute old. It could be an opportunity for people to make money because, at least from what we're seeing, at least in the earnings report, which we'll help pull up, the international growth is almost minuscule. I think it was only $13 million in international sales. And I think that this still has a market. And the reason is it's not going to replace Monster. But I think that there's this plays an even keel between the folks that are very much like for seltzer waters, like LaCroix and stuff like that, which have been very popular in certain communities. And then you have Monster, which is a very intense flavor, right? Red Bull is a very intense flavor, very much a kick. Whereas the Celsius is kind of playing the middle ground between the two, right? It's not going to kick you in the nuts with some sort of like fully leaded synthetic, you know, Monster energy drink flavor. But at the same time, you still get a good flavor of mango or tropic, you know, whatever. I've had watermelon one, which is really good. I've had a lot of them, and they saw them at the office, and a lot of people are drinking them. And it's not as, I guess, fully kick in the nuts as a Monster. And I think that that's probably the appeal. So it's attracting a new crowd who thinks like there's a certain group of people out there that think Monster energy drinks will literally kill you. And they give people, you know, people are like, oh, you'll get kidney stones from drinking that and yada, yada, yada. They're attracting now the people that are very sensitive or very much against sort of energy drinks in that respect. And so that's where I feel like the market could be is, hey, these actually aren't that bad. And I still need to pick me up. Coffee is not really what I want right now. So anyway, just kind of a food for thought. And Chris, I'll hand it back to you, and then maybe we can get into the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, my wife was first one to bring this to my attention because it turned out that like a lot of the nurses in her hospital were drinking this all the time, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. You know, let me take a look. And it seemed okay. It wasn't like, oh my God, like we need to all get in on this right away. But now after seeing the performance, it's just like, hey, wait a second, what's actually behind this? And how much more future growth is there really, you know, going further? And like what other areas of expansion do they have? So it'll be something to take a look at long term. I definitely have to do more due diligence on the actual product, and then I'll take a look at the numbers.
So you personally haven't tried much, or?
No, I tried Celsius once, and I thought it was okay. It's nothing that I would be like, oh my God, like I need to drink this forever. Like, you know, so I don't know. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's, how do I say it? I mean, I personally would prefer a Monster, but I don't think I'm the target audience. So there's a guy in my office. It's like every time I look at his desk, he has a different flavor. His wife is all about it. He's all about it. He's also a little bit more of a health nut. So, you know, that might be more of the target audience is people that are more conscious about, you know, putting these sodas or energy drinks into their body. And I think Celsius is probably a better product for being conscious of that stuff than obviously like a Monster or a Red Bull. But I kind of want to talk about this particular considerations because this is the company talking about it, right? I mean, this isn't us trying to kind of pump the stock or anything. I don't have a position, nor does Chris. So I think that this is straight from the company itself and their slide pack presentation that they just gave. So disruptive proven proprietary functional beverage backed by multiple clinical university studies and peer-reviewed medical journals. Jesus, what the hell? I'm curious now. Like, it's got me like, what are they backing it for? Maybe that's why all these nurses are drinking it. Anyway, so there's that. Capitalizing in health and wellness through innovation and expanding portfolio. People are leaving the artificial sugar drink space and other traditional categories, and they're going into this kind of fast-growing category in the beverage space. So more focused on health and wellness rather than that. The momentum, this is probably what we're going to talk about from a financial standpoint in just a little bit. This is what I saw. And I was like, holy crap, is this thing really done growing? And in North America, you're like, okay, maybe it's saturated in North America, but you have to think a lot of these companies, 40, 50%, if not more, of their sales are global. And especially if you have Pepsi, which is your distribution network, they have the ability to expand worldwide. And that's not going to stop. I mean, Monster did the same thing with Coca-Cola, right? Where Coca-Cola was able to distribute Monster, and that we saw how that kind of turned out for them in the future. So Pepsi distribution as of October 2022. So they've basically been able to expand a massive amount from 8 SKUs to nearly 15 SKUs. And I don't know what MULOC is, but there you go. And then expanded in usage occasions. Coffee with Celsius, really?
My wife just sent me a message. She said nurses were drinking it because it's caffeinated and healthier than Monster. Some nurses still drink Monster. Also, Alani is a brand that's a mesh between both. Tastes like Monster, but 0 calories like Celsius. Have you heard of that one? Alani?
Alani. Is that public? Ask Boss Lady if that's public. Let me see. That might be the real play.
Maybe. Energy drink maker Alani explores options for sale. Alani, I don't know. The company's working with JP Morgan, study its options. No, it's not public, but
okay. So this is the performance here. So this is last quarter, right? And then I think they go into the actual financial discussions, obviously, because this was, or did they just release? Am I maybe losing it?
No, here I have the updated one. If you want to.
Yeah, sorry, I thought I pulled up the right one.
Yeah, this is the updated right here, Q2, because this is from their September one. Maybe I'm getting an older one too.
Yeah, I guess maybe they reported a long time ago.
Yeah,
maybe they haven't reported yet.
No, they just reported. Really? Hold on one second. Yeah,
I'm gone. I'm not crazy. Let's just see what some people are saying. I don't see the same thing with Celsius back when Monster was ramping up their Monster Kids, man. The hats, man. Monster, that was a way of life and screaming at your face. The only thing I see with, I guess, is they're sponsoring every podcast. Hey, man, if they're sponsoring every podcast, they're doing something right. Podcasts are the way to go. Hell, they can sponsor me and Chris if they want.
Yeah. It's the 3-for-1 stock split. Where's the damn presentation, man? Come on, guys. I don't know. I don't see their updated. I mean, I see their SEC filing. I mean, we could look at that, but it's always nice to see a nice, pretty PowerPoint instead. But let me see if I can find. All right, fuck it. Let's just look at the quarterly report because I think that their latest 10Q. So anytime you guys, if you ever want to learn about a company like officially, you look at something called the 10Q. The 10Q is going to give you all the real numbers and real data behind it. It can seem like Chinese at times, but it's not that hard to understand.
Yeah, you read a few of them. That's the thing, is repetition is key.
Yeah.
You read a few of them, you really start to understand. And same thing with the cash flow statement. It might seem like Chinese, like Chris has said, but after you go through a few of them, it starts to make more sense. You might scratch your head. You might like, that doesn't make sense. But then eventually you get fluent. And like now, nobody taught me how to read a balance sheet. I did it myself and looked online and, listened to Bill Ackman videos, stuff like that. And now, like, I talk to the questions that I asked some of our VPs at UDoc, they're like, Matt, I don't have an answer for you. Like, I don't like, why are you asking me this? Right. Like, so, anyway, Back to you.
All right, so let's take a look at this. Number one, you can see here that the revenue has just gone bananas. Like 2023, the last 9 months, they've generated almost $970 million in revenue. That's up from 475. If you do it on a quarterly basis, it's 385, which means that even at the current run rate, it's going to be 385 times 4. It's like almost 1.5 billion in revenue just on
Yeah.
current run rate, which is freaking crazy.
And
And
for
then
the
at the
first
same
9
time,
months, it was up 104%.
yeah, so this is like super fast growth. And then income from operations have gone positive, which is always good. That means that the
Damn.
company has optionality to do more with the money that they have. Net income has grown from literally negative 146 million to positive 104. So you analyze this is about 400,000. I mean, 400 million. Let's give it a 20. I'd probably give it a generous multiple of about 5.
There you go.
So it'd be like 104 times 4 times. I mean, yeah, that means they're pretty fairly priced right now based on just normal yeah. So yeah, I'd say they're pretty fairly priced. Let me just look at it one more time just to confirm. So on a diluted basis, it's 0.89 times 4
I'm getting
multiplied
like
this
a
by
40. If you just take the current quarter,
yeah.
multiply that by 4, I'm getting like a 40 to 50 PE.
Yeah. So like let's say you give him a very generous PE of about, I don't know. Let's say 30, right? 30 may be high. I mean, that's like fast growth, but I mean, this is triple digit fast growth. The question is, can they maintain that fast digit growth? And maybe they can for like the next couple of years. So let's see, 0.9 times 4 times, let's say 35. Fuck it. Yeah, it's pretty fairly valued from a growth perspective right now. So I'd be a little bit like weary of overpaying for this, but then again, the question is, can they sustain this growth over a long period of time? Because if you even look at their cash flows, they had 176 million in this for 9 months. Okay, what's the one for? Whatever. Let's just look at the 9 month one. Okay, in the last 9 months, they had 176 million in net income, which then they add back depreciation and everything, changes in operating liability. So net cash provided is about 136. Oh, that's curious. It's probably because they're probably like investing in a lot of accounts receivables. Okay, the receivables grew. Deferred income taxes. Ooh, they're gonna have to pay some income taxes on the money. So let's see. Interesting. Net cash provided by financing. So they took on probably some preferred shares. Ooh, they have preferred shares. Got to look those up.
Yeah.
Yeah, they issued about 542 million in preferred shares. So they're pretty stacked in terms of cash. So they have about 760 million in cash right now, which is good. That's curious. Why didn't their cash go up? What did they spend their money on? Stock-based comp is fine. It's pretty flat year over year. Let's see. Inventories. Okay. So change in operating. So the inventories is down as well. Well, they spent money on inventories. Promotional allowance. Okay, so they're heavily promoting the shit out of this right now, which makes sense. That's why they're fast growing, right? You gotta crack a few eggs to get there. And then right here, dividends paid on preferred shares, about 20 million.
20
You know what?
million.
I'm gonna have to check out their preferred, man. Be interesting to
I
see
see.
if there's. I wonder if there's conversion or not. But whatever. Yeah, it's a very interesting company. Like I said, I'll have to do a much bigger deep dive into it. Yeah, it doesn't seem like they have a lot.
But the thing is that I want to tap into is, does it split? Does it show you the split between the U.S. income versus? There you
Yeah,
go.
right here.
There you
Right
go.
here.
This is
So
what I really wanted to touch on because, like, look at those numbers.
yeah, majority of their growth is coming from the US, but if they only recently launched in the other markets, then that's understandable, right? So let's say in Asia, they've almost grown about 70 something percent. In the US, it's just been double. It's literally double. That's nuts.
So that's my thought
Yeah.
process is like if they end up, I mean, let's just do a hypothetical. Say they're able to double the North American income. So it ends up being about $3 billion a year on a run rate because, based off of kind of where is it 3 billion? What are they making now on a 9-month basis?
Right now on a 9-month basis. You
They're
mean
making
what do you mean
300 something.
in revenue?
371. Oh, that was the first. So 930.
Yeah.
So 930. Let's just say double that. So they're making. Let's just say they end up making 2.5 billion in revenue, and let's just say international they'll probably get to at least $1 billion. So they're making 3.5 billion. I mean, in revenue, their net income is probably gonna, I don't know, quadruple or
I'm gonna have
go
to
up
read
5x
this.
from here.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to read through this balance sheet. Like, yeah, I gotta read through this. This is one of those things that's just not gonna be easy to
I'm
do.
curious to if you go to the debt though, if there's any crazy things in here that
Let me look at their
show.
balance sheet. Hold on. That's nice. Blah 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 blah. Balance sheet, consolidated balance sheet. Perfecto. Okay. So assets wise, they have 760 million in cash. Everything, inventories, blah blah blah, ends up adding to about 1.2 billion. In liabilities, they have just the convertible shares. I mean, convertible preferred share. Ooh, they're convertible shares. That's
I don't know if they're on the market though.
they
I'll
may
check
be.
them.
Yeah, it might be private deal, but other than that, I don't think they have any other debt.
Yeah, I'm looking at long term. There's not much in the long term. All of it's kind of like deferred tax.
Yeah. No, there's no debt. Well, there's
It
no
makes sense. They have 760 million in cash. I mean,
yeah, which can fund
which makes me think why
did
did they do the convertible last year then? I mean, did they just need to get through to a place where they just wanted to make sure?
maybe the investors really were adamant on them not going like the corporate debt route because they're so new. Corporate debt issuance is hard right now, So maybe that's why they went with the. I'd have to look at this preferred equity. At what price does it convert? Let me see.
And at what time?
Preferred.
I think I started seeing when you were looking up for the balance sheet. I think it said something on it. There was a paragraph that I saw
right here. So here, the company and Pepsi. Okay, so that's why Pepsi entered to a multiple agreement. That's what Pepsi did. Pepsi said, "Listen, we want to make sure that we enjoy the success of your." We enjoy your success. So in exchange for cash proceeds of 550 million, excluding transaction costs, the transition agreement specifies payments to be made by Pepsi to Celsius in exchange for Celsius transitioning distribution rights to Pepsi. Oh, this is interesting.
That's
this
smart.
Is very interesting.
I think it's something similar that Monster did with Coca-Cola.
Yeah. You know what?
I think Coca-Cola bought like 15% or something like that of Monster back then, and I don't know if they still hold it. To be honest with you, just like how McDonald's did the same thing with Chipotle.
Matt, I wonder if the real play here is actually Pepsi. Like you could backdoor your way into growth by buying into Pepsi instead of overpaying for Celsius, because technically speaking, if the distribution rights are with Pepsi, right, and they have an equity like position, I've got to see what the total equity would look like. Any growth in Monster would end up being like a call option for Pepsi to grow as well.
Celsius,
the question is,
I know what you mean.
Yeah. What's the value? Well, then again, the valuation on Pepsi is kind of high too. So I don't know. Pepsi's valuation.
I have shares. I have shares of Pepsi, and it's coming down. But I don't know. I think Pepsi is a $200-some billion company, right? So it's like, is this actually going to move the dial for? But I'm curious if they actually say anything about Celsius in their 10Q. So let me see.
Now, the benefit here for Pepsi is that one, they get a nice, steady, fixed dividend, but they also have, my wife just sent me because my wife was looking at the numbers from I don't know when, but they have an 8.5% stake in the company. So let's say,
8.5.
yeah, so let's say Celsius becomes $100 billion company, which is 10x from here. That means that Pepsi, for that 550 million, they would end up getting all the dividends from their distribution deal, right? And at the same time, they would be getting an equity position, 8.5% of like 100 billion or something like that. So it ended up being like pretty value accretive to Pepsi, but Pepsi's a big company right now. Pepsi's like about 228 billion. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, it shows.
And Pepsi's growing too. So
it's not yeah, if you want to do some deep diving on it, I'm looking and I just type Celsius into the 10Q on Pepsi's 10Q, and it's everywhere. So they have to put footnotes with everything associated with Celsius Holdings and the distribution rights, and see if there's any like big nuggets kind of in the background. The fair value of our investment approaches approximates the transaction price, accrued dividends, amortized cost, 558 million, blah 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 blah. Interesting. Yeah.
My wife sent me something very interesting. She sent me shareholders. 30% of it is Carl DeSantis. I don't know if Carl DeSantis is related to Governor DeSantis. Let me see. Carl DeSantis. No, I don't think so, dear. I think it just turns out to be I wonder if there is any.
Oh, he died. He just recently died.
Oh yeah, 84.
Oh.
All right.
Interesting.
August 10th. Yeah.
Celsius is all right. Where's all these sales coming from? I'm not hearing anybody. Like Chris, you said it was all right. I'm hearing Warren in the chat say it's all right. I think it's okay. I prefer Monster. Like, where are all these sales coming from then?
I mean, maybe it's just Filipino nurses.
Maybe it's just the Filipino nurses, which I need to find some of those.
I don't know if you know this. I don't know. Maybe this is. I don't know. This is going to sound a little bit. I don't want to call it racist, but it's going to sound a little bit like just stereotypical. But I don't know why. But there were so many nurses that were all into like Filipino nurses at my hospital that were all into MLM scams. I don't know why I don't know. They're like, Chris, you want to buy makeup? I was like, no, man. Like, why do I want to buy makeup? And maybe your wife like makeup. And I was just like, are you trying to get me into an MLM thing? So I don't know.
They're all trying to sell Herbalife tea and stuff like that.
See, Zoe's a nurse, so he knows. Zoe, is it true that all the Filipino nurses all in MLM scams? Let us know if that's real. Maybe because I'm from New York and he's in California, so it could be. I wonder if it's a coast to coast thing.
It's true. That's so funny. I'm curious, man. I want to see the Alani thing. Maybe you and I need to do some more due diligence, because like I remember when was it Dumb Money? They were all about when The Rock was bringing out his drink or whatever, the Zoa drink or whatever like that. I feel like that ended up kind of flopping a little bit, but yeah, I'm kind of curious if there's any other opportunities out in the market that are kind of exploding right now. I'm trying to think if there's any. I mean, Gatorade's already owned by Pepsi. I'm starting to see those like little electrolyte Gatorades come out, which I see a lot of people drinking. Yeah, anyway, it could be some due diligence to be done on the beverage market for sure.
Matt, I can't. I did a quick Google search. Right, check this out. Filipino American nurse in Dallas, Texas, was sentenced last week to orchestrating a Ponzi scheme that caused victims, many whom were Filipino nurses, over $1 million. So this is a transnational thing, dude. I don't know why. It's a thing that like plagues, I guess, the community. Maybe. I
think they're all just trying to do their best. They're all just trying to.
Dude, they are the hardest working nurses. They're but let me tell you, if you ever mess with one of them, bro, that's it. Just move to another hospital. They all know each other. They all talk to each other. Your patients will never, ever, ever get seen first. Good luck surviving in that environment. If you mess with one of dude, that's the one. There was So if you work at a hospital, the doctors are usually the Indians, right? If you go to the doctors, a lot of Indian doctors are around. The nurses are a lot of Filipinos. Like, it's just so if you fuck around with one of the Filipino nurses, bro, that's it. Everyone in the hospital knows who you are. You're done. That's it. Just move. Like, find another hospital.
Move to a different state. You're done.
Yeah.
Even the local, the hospital next door is gonna know. If you can't be in the same hospital system, you got to move systems.
But they're awesome, dude. I loved working with the nurses that I worked with. Amazing people, hardworking. And let me tell you, they just, dude, overtime was just constant. Like, sign up for overtime. Some of these nurses would do like 40 hours of overtime. So that means that they're 80 hours a week,
That if I was getting overtime, man, you would never see me. I get paid salary for a reason. They know.
Yeah.
They know. All right. Let me pull up. Do you have anything particular on Carnival that you want to pull up?
Yeah, actually.
The earnings report?
Yeah, let me pull that up.
I wasn't sure if you want to pull up the 10Q or the earnings.
Nah, I'll just pull up the main data for them. I don't think they published their earnings just yet. So let me get this real quick.
Let me see when. That reminds me, Pepsi. Did I even look at the Pepsi earnings? Yeah, I did. I remember seeing
Okay.
Okay.
So just share my screen. By the way, Filipinos don't eat pho. Okay, that's Thai food. Wait, is that Thai? No, Vietnamese. That's Vietnamese. Sorry.
Which, if you don't like pho, you can get the pho. No, I didn't mean it like that. If you don't like pho, you can get out, right? Like,
yeah, pho is good.
Pho is
really good. If you've never tried pho is this soup that they make out of bone broth, but it's so freaking good. My wife took me to one when she was doing her residency in Jacksonville. Bruh, so good. Maybe next time I'm on vacation, we'll get some pho. So yeah, it sounds like pho, or it's spelled like pho, but it's not pho, it's pho. So this is pretty much Carnival. Okay, Carnival's operating income wise, they are a really good business. They're generating tons of cash flows all throughout the last 7 to 10 years. And then of course COVID hits. During COVID times, there was no bookings. They had to like freeze all the departures. But you can see here slowly it's recovering. And this is the key right here to Carnival, where this recovery in sailings is generating them a ton of cash flow. The key is they had to take on a lot of debt in order to survive this massive, massive U-turn right here. But if you look out going forward like 5, maybe 10 years, you can see that they're pretty much getting back to where they were originally, right? So it's a very easy story to get people behind, which is, hey, at one point these guys were losing money hand over fist because they weren't doing a lot of bookings. But you can see here now cash from operations is recovering back to almost pre-pandemic levels. So if this is getting back to normal, eventually it's going to translate into the stock price, and that stock price is gonna do exceptionally well. So if you look at their liabilities, let me just pull up their balance sheet and show you their total debt, because their debt is the key. Balance sheet. So right here, their liabilities, they grew their liabilities
starting to come down.
But it's starting to come down. Absolutely. So if you look, this is on a quarterly basis. Let me go back actually. Equity. So the equity position dropped, but that's fine. Let me see. Goodwill. Long-term debt. Okay, here we go.
It's only $12.
So you can see here. Yeah. So if you look at this right here, this is their long-term debt. So you can see here previously they had only about 9.7 billion in debt. Most of this debt was traditionally used to do capital financing on new ships, and yeah, they took advantage of that. So they got hit with two things at one time, which is one, they got hit with COVID, which was really bad for them because they had to take on a lot of debt. But then also since the Federal Reserve started raising interest rates, they also had to deal with that debt, those financing costs. But even there you can see here their long-term debt is actually moving in the downward slope. So they are paying debt back using existing cash flows pretty fast, but it's still a lot of debt on the balance sheet. So if you have a long-term outlook on things, I can see Carnival getting back to a position where, they get back to normal. So right here, if you look at their debt, you see this debt issuance number. You see how it's going down because that's them paying debt off.
So that's what, 4 billion in 2 quarters?
Yeah. Yeah. They paid down right here, 1.6 and 2.5 billion in debt. Can you imagine? All from existing cash flows.
Yeah, where's the cash flow at? Let's see. So CapEx.
Right here, cash from operating, right? So their cash from operating was about 1.8 billion.
So about 3 billion in 2 quarters.
Yep. So they paid down almost $4 billion in debt very quickly. And so, one of these days I'll do a more deep dive on the Patreon and just show people like, hey, this is what it looks like. This is what the target should be. But overall, if you look at them on just a pure share price perspective, they're trading at about 15 billion. I think it should be trading closer to 25, but that's just
that's the thing. I mean, we just saw for the first 2 quarters, right? Or the last 2 quarters, they're kind of getting themselves out of a hole. I don't know what the seasonality looks like, right? Because I'm afraid to kind of just take the last quarter, which was 1.8 billion and kind of, or it was like maybe 1.5 or whatever billion in cash flow from operations, just multiply that by 4. So I'm not really sure the seasonality, but based off what you're showing, it looks like it's pretty flat and consistent.
So you can see here. So you can see here, August is usually their strongest month, which is what just passed, right? So last August, they did about 6.9 billion in revenue, which is like more than what they've done in the past. In 2019, they surpassed that number, right? So you can see even this is trending in the right direction. So they just have to keep repeating this trend, get to a faster amount. And I think they'll do it because they've been adding a ton of ships to their fleet as well. So, and this is not a small company by any means. This is actually a pretty big company with a lot of new ships.
But I'm kind of curious, instead of the revenue, can you go to like the rolling cash flow?
Yeah. So let's do operating income. Let's do that because operating income is always the healthiest metric. So you can see here, they actually went from negative 6.2 billion at, I guess, well, this is the peak, which has negative 6.7 billion to now generating a 0.9 billion in positive operating income. So,
but what about pre-pandemic? Actually, so how far? What is this? Is this annual? Oh, that's quarterly.
Yeah, so this is quarterly. So you can see here during the strongest months, they generated about 1.9 billion in operating income. The rest of the time, they would generate about $500 million. So yeah, once again, their operating income, if it gets back to normal, what it was, that means that they're going to have about 3 to 4, maybe 5 billion every year to pay down that debt. So, you multiply the debt out and get them back to historical levels, which is the 9 billion mark. Balance sheet.
But I see what you're saying, right? So I'm just doing some quick math. So say they were to get to 1.6 to 2 billion in the August quarters, the rest is say 400 million. That ends up being about 3 billion-ish or so in operating income a year if they're able to sustain that. The company's trading at $15 billion. So technically you're paying a price to operating income of 5, which is low, right? But maybe it's not because it's cyclical. Like I'm just trying to understand, and maybe it's worth me kind of looking at what the historical cruise lines are looking like. But I'm also curious about the debt schedule and when some of that comes due.
Yeah, we can take a look at that real quick. CCL.
And I don't want to steal too much because I know you're gonna do a deep dive for Patreon as well.
Yeah. Let me just quickly take a look. They actually addressed this in their quarterly filings. So adjusted, blah, 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 blah. Give me your debt, baby. Just want to see the debt. The rest of this stuff is nice, but I just want to see the debt. Scheduled maturities. So these are the 2023 maturities. and
Yeah, if you just
total
share whatever
debt.
screen you're looking at.
So you can see, oh, sorry.
Yeah. All right.
Share it. I didn't realize it opened a new tab. There we go. So accelerating deleveraging efforts. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so they went from in Q1 35 billion to 31 billion. That explains that $4 billion drop in debt. Let's look at that maturity schedule if they published one here. And if not, curious. I thought they might have done that. Surprised they did not.
I'm sure
I'll have to find it.
I'm sure you could go back in the 2020, 2021 when they issued it, what they issued in the 10Qs and the 10Ks.
Yeah.
Because it was a big topic of discussion. I mean, they were getting $5 billion here, $5 billion there. I mean, they were like getting debt from Oprah. It was crazy.
They're getting debt from Oprah. Let me actually pull up their last investor day because maybe they addressed it there.
That might be. But yeah, it makes me kind of curious because like this used to be a dividend company, right? And
and share buybacks. I think they did share buybacks too.
So I think a lot of people were kind of frustrated because they cut the dividend. And I think when they were going down, I think people were buying it because they had yet to cut the dividend, because I don't think people understood how deep things were going to get for them during the pandemic. But obviously people started getting trapped on the cruises and they wouldn't let them come to port and all that stuff. And that obviously killed the cruise line business for a little bit. But look at that. That's a pretty
so they own all of this: Ada, P&O, Seabourn, Holland America, Carnival, which is their namesake, Princess Cruises, Cunard, Costa. So like I said, not a small company by any means. You know what? I will go deep diving into their nether regions and find all their debt. But that's going to be a Patreon exclusive. So.
Yeah, you got to sign up for that with the Hot Chris link down below. Curious, man. I want to maybe just pull up the screen here, and entire screen. Let me pull up this one, and we can take a quick look at what we have been doing in the background. I'm just going to double check. Yeah, we got rid of all the fancy numbers and stuff. But so to date, Chris and I have kind of acquired $400 some or so through the channel. And eventually, all of the money that we get through the channel, we're going to be investing into this YouTube Moolah account, unless Chris has a better name for it. But him and I will chat every once in a while and we say, we should buy a share of this. We should buy a share of that. And so we started last week, I think, with Verizon, TQQQ. I think we bought some TLT. And then more recently this week, we bought Disney today after the results yesterday, early this morning. Pre-market, I bought some Disney. I didn't get the best price for it, but 87.83, you can't complain. It's not great, not horrible. Dutch Bros, we have a pretty decent price, 26.35. I bought that the other day. I bought 10 shares of Rocket Lab yesterday at $4.39. Based off the most recent earnings, I thought it was pretty good. I was hoping it would tank down to the threes, mid threes. It did not. So I was just like, well, it's like before anybody starts getting into the stock, I'd rather buy some. So I bought 10 of that because it's only $4 a share. I was like kind of aiming for the $40 to $80 range per position right now, but we can adjust that. We have Upcellera. We have DPST. That's the one that I was talking about, Hot Chris, where we did not get in it at the right time. It already run up like 20-30% in like the past 2 days. And by the time we were chatting about buying some, it already run up like 15 or 16% that day. And we were like, and by the time I woke up the next morning, it was already up another 5%. And I had to buy a pre-market. And I was like, this is not a good idea, but I feel like in the long term, the next couple months, it'll be perfectly fine. But
yeah, I think so. The thing is, this is what happens. These triple leveraged ETFs are not for long-term investing. They are for short-term movements in a specific direction. They may feel like, hey, over the long term, this has been appreciating, but I'd stay away from that. I particularly am bullish on regional banks, especially in the short term. I think the CPI numbers are going to come in kind of cold, so we're going to see good CPI numbers, which means that a lot of these regional banks, their AOCI losses should start to go down in value. And so I think the regionals will rally. So, my thesis on the Santa Claus rally should see DPST rise rather quickly in the next few weeks, in which case hopefully that means that we see some cha-ching, cha-ching, but we'll see.
So let's talk about this because you and I talk about this pretty good as well. Yeah, I would love. It's me and Chris's Vegas or vacation fund. No, I'm just kidding. But like some of these are very long term focused. Like for me, the Dutch Bros one is like 10-year sort of focus. The Rocket Lab one for me is 10-year focused. I really like the Abcelara idea, and I think you got me convinced in my Robinhood because I buy crypto through Robinhood, and I generally just like move it to my wallets after. So once a paycheck, now that I've got my house, I was like saving some money to like get out of an apartment. Now that I kind of have a house, I think I might just toss like $50 a pay into Abcelara, and once it gets up to a couple thousand, maybe I'll like slow down, but. That's one of those ones where I'm like, I'll gamble. It might go nowhere, but it might do really well. So you got me convinced on that one. DPST is definitely a trade, right? Like you and I, had it been before March or February of this year, DPST probably would not even been on our radar. Obviously, it wouldn't have been on my radar because I wasn't looking at it. But you mentioned it to me after we started having that short-term liquidity problems back in late 1Q, early 2Q, and so. That's one to potentially play a rebound, and maybe that's an opportunity to just take a quick look at like what DPST has done over the past year to date, and why Chris might be looking. Let me know if you can see the Robinhood that I just pulled up because I'm sharing the screen.
I can see it. I can see it.
So this is the year to date. It was down 78% year to date because it was trading at 200 to 250 to 300. And the liquidity problems happened at the end of 1Q, and it's really just been flatlined since then. And I think you told me like the May timeframe, to buy it, and it had a pretty good run from there.
Yeah,
and I never bought it, but I didn't realize that it was back down. Is this just because of Katango and the fact that it's like just triple leveraged, or is it the regional banks down that much again?
No, the regional banks, some of them have pulled back to like below, mainly because of some of the regulatory framework changes that were announced in the summer.
Oh, wow,
where they might have to keep some additional liquidity on the balance sheet. So that's what caused them to kind of go down a little bit. So we can take a look at some major ones. Like look at KeyBank, KEY. Right. This is a pretty big one from Ohio. So you can
all
see
these are year to date, by the way.
Yeah. So if you look at that run up in the summer and then how it drew down, you're going to see a very similar thing. So you see in the summertime, they ran up and then it kind of just fizzled going downwards with that pending legislation. And then same thing with TFC. If you want to look at PacWest, you can look at that. Same thing. You see that they ran up during the summertime and July, and they kind of topped out there. And then those regulatory frameworks changes kind of came into the picture, and they've been kind of flatlined since, with a little bit of a decline. Which one's that one? Western.
This is WSFS means we stand for service. It's a regional bank, kind of in the northeastern part of the U.S. I think that this one, I used to own Bryn Mawr Trust, but that got acquired by somebody else.
Look at First Horizon. That one had a potential acquisition by TD at one point. Great management, but same thing. You see in the summertime, they had that run up and then it just came down. So that's pretty much been the story behind the regional banks, but I think they catch up. I think they're going to get back into
What about all banks? I mean, I know FinTech is down. I mean, all these banks looks like they're pretty, but that's pretty interesting. Well, Wells Fargo has always been troubled since 2018 timeframe, so maybe that's not the best. JP Morgan's not doing too horrible.
JP Morgan's just the most conservative one, man. They're just making that money, bro.
This is the one that I made money off of during the pandemic. Like when it went down to $88, I was like, buy. Because like
JP Morgan,
yeah. I mean, it was trading at the biggest premium price to book, but it's just like it's because they're so conservative, right? But then you have companies
Yeah.
like Citibank, and Citibank is always struggling.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yep.
just some food for thought
There's
there.
there's a regional one from San Francisco if you want to see. It's called East
Yeah.
West Bank. That one's good. They're very conservative balance sheet. They don't have any issues. Let me just look it up. East West. One
There you
of
go.
yeah. Yep. They're out of
Same thing.
Pasadena. They're a smaller bank, but they're good. They're very well run, and they have a good dividend too. That's pretty secure.
Yeah,
About 3.39.
3.39.
Yeah, with a PE
Not
ratio of
horrible.
6. I mean, all these banks have literally single digit PEs, man. It's nuts.
Is it all just because they all are holding 2 years and the 2 year just went to shit? Like, is that really what it is? And they just need the short term
Well,
liquidity to let them pass through, or what? What is it exactly?
well, remember the bank's business model is very simple. They borrow short and they lend long. When the
Yep.
yield is inverted, it kind of screws with their business model, right? Because
Yep.
so if you want to lend out longer, it's actually cheaper than to just take depositor money short. That's what they do. They take your money in the short term and they lend it out long term, right?
Yep.
So and they make a money on the spread. So right now they're not exactly there with the spread. Eventually they're going to get to a point where it flips, where the short-term interest rates are going to be 1-2% and the long interest rates are going to be 5-6%. So they make a 400 basis point spread on that,
Yep.
So the other problem is they all issued a shit ton of mortgages and debt when
At
times
3%.
were at 3%. And then right now these mortgages and this debt instruments all yield 7-8%. So
So
it's like,
effectively, mark to market to offload them, they'd have to sell them at a huge discount, meaning
right.
the value of what the asset was worth at one time is now much lower. So that
Yeah.
is why the price to books of some of these companies are getting truly impacted right now. Because technically, if they were to say wholesale everything today, like they would have had to do it at SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, and stuff of the like, they would have owed, billions upon billions of dollars. When in reality, if they had the ability to be liquid and wait, a couple of years, it would have been probably okay. But it's just when you have the regulatory environment that we do, they're like, they kind of make you nut up or shut up, right? You can't just hold negative $20 billion on the balance sheet, right?
Yeah, I'll show you what it looks like because I think this is a very interesting picture. And it's funny because there was actually some TikTokers that were like fear mongering. And I was like, oh God, I wish they hold on. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, sorry, I was stuck.
Okay, here we go. So this is what it looks like. So right now, accumulated other than comprehensive income at the US banks. So if you look at 2020, they didn't really have that much. They actually had, they were in the positive. So that means that they issued debt for let's say 3% and the interest rates were like 4. So that means that, the value of the debt is actually more. Well, it turns out if you issue debt at 3%, if the prevailing interest rates at the time are lower than what you issued the debt at, you get income. That's what it would be counted as. On the other hand, if you do the opposite, which is you lend money at 3%, the current interest rate is 7, that means that you're actually in the negative. Now, these are just paper losses, but you can see here a lot of banks in the US have these ton of paper losses. So in 2022 Q3, that almost $348 billion in paper losses distributed among the banks. So if you look at all these banks, they all have AOCI losses, including JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, which is fine. Most of them can actually afford the AOCI losses because it's just paper losses. It's not necessarily something that they have to worry about. But it's something to keep an eye on. Now, one of the good things is that as interest rates get cut, these AOCI losses will dissipate sharply, right? So you're going to see this kind of trend much, much better this way. So right now, over time, a lot of this stuff gets amortized away anyway. So if you issue debt and people pay back that debt, that means that paper loss becomes zero.
Right.
So, right now, a lot of people are, have homes with loans that are 30 years long at like 3%, 4%. So the bank is technically sitting on a giant AOCI loss. But let's say that person who's holding a 3%, 4% mortgage pays over time, that will help those AOCI losses dissipate slowly. And then at the same time, if let's say they refinance their home, that means that the bank that issued it, that AOCI loss would get turned to zero, because now the bank got their money back, Or if let's say you sold your home, so if you sold your home, the bank would get their money back, which means that AOCI loss would be zeroed out again. So that's the key here with banks.
And that's the same thing with TLT that we were kind of thinking when the market kind of does turn around for. Let me share the screen again. When the market does kind of turn around for, let's just say, the treasuries market and things start to get cut again, the anticipation is that TLT will do the opposite effect, right? Which is, it's been going down severely because they keep raising and raising and raising the interest rates. And then once it's kind of been flatlining, it's kind of stuck around the mid to low 80s. Once it eventually becomes cut, hopefully in the next 6 months or so, the hope is that this is going to start skyrocketing, because now they're going to be able to sell those bonds that are kind of on the books that they've been buying at 5-6% or whatever they are. And now if they're only at 4% or 3%, they're able to sell those 5-6% bonds for an inflated price, because now people can't go and get those bonds, right? So the value of those bonds can go up to try to match what's going on in the market. It's the exact opposite of what's been happening, right? Exactly what Hot Chris is talking about. Like when things were only selling for 2 to 3%, now you have a bond that's yielding 4.5%. Who's going to want the 2 to 3% bond? So in reality, you have to shrink the value of that bond, the capital or coupon of that, to make the coupon go up in order to match what's on the market. Otherwise, nobody's going to want your damn bond.
Yeah. And TLT, by the way, issues a dividend too. So, it's a monthly dividend, by the way.
I was about to ask if it was monthly, because I was like, should we be expecting a monthly dividend? Which would be really cool to see, because we have a couple dividend stocks in here. So we have TLT, TQQQ actually offers a dividend, believe it or not. Verizon offers a dividend. Nintendo does as well. And so it'll be cool to be able to take those dividends and reinvest. And we have any cash we have as well. The money market, I think, gives 5%, and that pays monthly as well.
The current annualized dividend on TLT is about 3.71. So, like if we had bought this, the X date, if we had been holding TLT on November 1st, that means that 2 days ago, we would have been paid 28 cents per share of TLT. That we have. So
people are wondering why we don't have SLG. If we should have bought SLG last week or 2 weeks ago when it dipped back into the 20s. Shit.
Yeah,
we got to keep an eye. I mean,
we got some opportunities, man. It's back to like 30s again, so definitely got to buy some SLG.
Yeah, it was in the high 38 range. I told a guy, there's a guy he asked me, so I got him in Rocket Lab, Palantir. I tell him, I'm like, dude, I'm not going to tell you when to sell. You're the one that's telling yourself when to sell. It's like, I'm holding these things for a long time. But I told him Rocket Lab, Palantir. He liked SLG. He did a quick look at it. I don't know how much he has in it though, but it used to be my boss's boss. So hopefully he turns out well from it, because it started taking a dip like 2 weeks ago. He was like, Matt Money, what the hell's going on over here? So anyway, it was pretty funny.
Someone said, I'd rather own O than SLG. Go right ahead. Amen. I'm not for this retail. I'm not into the retail triple net.
When the risk goes away, I might be a buyer of O again. And I used to be a buyer of O. My fear, and the reason why I was going to sell O in the medium term, Chris, was my fear of Amazon e-pharmacies kind of taking away the lunch. And to me, I think that's really the only reason why CVS and Walgreens are still open, is because of the pharmacies part of the business. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, with now, so that was my original thought, is like, okay, well, there's like 5-6% of the business if CVS and Walgreens are out, right? And then now you're starting to have all this thievery going on where people are able to burglarize the stores and have no consequences. It's like, I've seen so many Walgreens in my area shut down, and they're just empty. Nobody's ever in them. I'm like, okay, so, and then Chris, when I was in CVS, when I was buying gifts for Jeremy, because I just wanted to make sure we didn't show up open-handed, like everything was behind the glass. I had to like get them to open it up. So I was just like, the heck is this? Like it took so long just to get a couple items just so we could have a night and play poker. Like it was just, to me, it's just like something either has to change or the business will go out of business, right? Like there's one or two things that have to happen. And you're noticing the same with Walmart and Target leaving certain cities. And so once it dies down, I could see myself buying back in if things change. But I don't know. Right now, it's kind of scary. Unless the valuation was super cheap, then yeah. But I just don't see it at these sort of prices.
Yeah. All right. So it's been an hour. So
perfect.
Let's head on out.
Yeah, much appreciated. And I think the only thing we have next week, if I remember correctly, is CPI data coming out for October. And I think we might have Astra. I don't have anything scheduled for Astra Space Company, but they did actually just announce that they're going to go private. So maybe we could talk about whatever that is on Tuesday, or if you have any other thoughts. I did want to shout out Seymour Duck. I don't know if I mentioned it yesterday. You gave us a super chat. I much appreciate that. And then I just saw Jebic Music. Thank you for becoming a member. That's really helpful for us. Like I said, all the money from memberships and everything, it's going to go straight into this portfolio that we get to talk about once a week or twice a week. Feel free to always hit us up on Twitter and stuff like that. We won't guaranteed buy every stock, but we will talk about every stock. As much as I think some people want us to buy every single stock that they mention, it's just not fathomable. And so Chris and I will kind of do our due diligence and buy the stuff that we like. Like Nintendo wasn't really even on my radar until Seymour Duck brought it up. So probably wouldn't have been in the portfolio unless you guys are poking. So it can happen, right? So I'm not saying don't let us know. But as you can see, we both kind of have our flavors and color in here as well. Like Chris has his ABCL, which, after looking at it and talking about it for a quarter or two now, I might take an entry position. And then, Chris has his Verizon. I personally am not a Verizon fan, but, I have them for a phone service, but for the stock, I don't know. I see it getting back to $45. Will it go back to 50s, 60s? I don't know, but we'll see with that one. But it's always great to have a good conversation with you, and I'll see you next week, my friend.
Yep. See you later. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks all.
Bye.